Yeah, and welcome to session number session number 11 of Genesis in Depth. I'm Dr. John McMath. I'm joined by my friends in Italy and in the Philippines as we study through the book of Genesis in greater depth, quite a bit greater depth than we're able to go into in a survey. As I've said before, Genesis is foundational to biblical theology. It's foundational to our understandings of uh, an awful lot of things. The doctrine of salvation is one of the most important. But if we're really going to understand God's plan for all of history and His plan for the kingdom, His plan for redemption, we have to start with Genesis. So that's what we're doing here. We're building on what we already have in the surveys and trying to go a bit further. So without further ado, let's start in Genesis. About 7 and verse 6. Let me get my share screen going properly. Let's see what it's going to do. And it's taking forever to do it. Okay, now I've got a gallery with everybody. I see Oscar, I see Roger, I see Christy, I see everybody. All right. Hey guys, hey, and Anton is there. Oscar, good to see you, man. Okay. I'm waiting for this new feature to come up. And just for information, Zoom has added a feature that apparently takes an awful lot of bandwidth. I'm looking at my monitor on what's actually going out, and you can see the little circle going around. You can see me probably, and you can see the circle going around. Yeah, no circle. Okay. You can see me though, right? Way up to the right. Okay. Oh, this is a real pain. If it requires this every time I switch screens, it's unusable. So I'm going to see if I can make this stop. No, I can't leave. Well, this is really handy. And of course, I'm recording this entire thing. I just love it when Zoom changes features in midstream. Okay, that's not going to work. So I'm going to shut that down if I can. So that one's going to leave the meeting. And I'm going to now see if I can join again. Okay. Now what have we got going on? Okay, is anything coming across? Okay. Let me stop the share then. Oh, that's swell. Oh, that's just beautiful. Oh, oh goodness. Oh, okay. This is not pretty. This is a slide we've seen before as we were introducing the concept of the Great Flood last time. I introduced the idea that the flood is an illustration of the universality of the wrath of God and the exceptionality of grace. So if we look at wrath as the demonstration of God's anger for sin against the entire world, grace is the decision that God made to save some 8 people and some animals out of that flood. Okay, now looking at what you're seeing here, I'd enjoy some feedback if you're finding this thing helpful at all. I may be able to change it back to the classic way if that isn't what we want to be doing. At any rate, it looks like I'm superimposed over the front of this picture. So some details are going on here, and I'm going to get into this. In chapter 7 and verse 6, we're told that Noah was 600 years old when the flood of water came upon the earth. Now, after the flood, he's going to live another 900 years. But you'll notice here that um, the chronological tags are very precise, very explicit. So Noah was 600 years old. And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with them entered the ark because of the water. There were clean animals and unclean animals, and so on. After 7 days, the water of the flood came upon the earth. That's verse 10. Verse 11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day, all of the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were opened. The rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, again, these time tags are very explicit. So the 600th year of Noah's life, I'm assuming the second month of the 600th year of Noah's life, but it doesn't say that explicitly. On the 17th day of the month, precisely on that same day, 3 things happen. The fountains of the great deep burst open, the floodgates of the sky are opened, and the rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. These are all related, but there's some questions that we have. The floodgates of the sky has been suggested to be the breaking of the vapor canopy that was above the earth. A vapor canopy would explain why there wasn't rain. A vapor canopy would also explain why the pre-flood universe or world seemed to have a very consistent um, uh, climate all over the planet. There doesn't seem to be a polar and equatorial difference. When we look down at fossilized woolly mammoth elephants, for example, we find them with, well, actually not even fossilized, but frozen in the ice. We find them with green stuff in their tummies. So when the disaster came, they were up to their ears in jungle, and this would be in places like Siberia. So we've got some interesting bits and pieces there. Vapor canopy, entirely possible. Fountains of the Great Deep is explained by some Christian geologists as underwater storehouses for water, like big reservoirs underground. I've never seen evidence for that, but it is a possibility. it would make sense that water could come from large quantities underground. But I've looked for the evidence for that, and apart from the biblical text, we really don't have anything. Others have suggested that fountains of the great deep would make better sense as volcanoes or volcanic activity in general. We do see lots of evidence of volcanic activity, but it pretty much comes in two eras. There's an era of volcanic activity that is a part of the basement rocks and is prior to the flood levels. And there appears to be some volcanic activity from the time of the third day, uh, rising of dry land out of the water. And at that point, some broken stuff and the lava would have flowed out at that time. It's likely that there was volcanic activity um, at the end of the flood when the mountains were raised up. That makes good sense. But it's hard to visualize the volcanic activity during the flood itself. At any rate, we've got some problems with this. Problems doesn't mean errors. It does mean that we don't entirely understand, and so we should probably not be dogmatic. The main effect is water. The big thing. There is certainly an ice age associated with the flood, and there is certainly a great deal of volcanic activity associated with the flood, but they're not necessarily right here. And so the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. I'm going to look at the chronology of the whole thing after just a little bit. Okay, and they took the male and female and all the flesh, and the flood came for 40 days. This is verse 17. And the water increased and lifted up the ark so that it rose above the earth. And again, this doesn't demand an enormous amount of water, but it does require that the water cover the entire surface of the earth up to whatever altitude the highest prominences were, the highest mountains. The mountains were covered to a depth of 15 cubits higher, so 45 feet, 7.5 meters. So all flesh that moved on the earth perished. That's verse 21. Very important note there. Everything died, with the exception of Noah and his family. Fascinating thing. I've been told that the Chinese pictogram for salvation is a picture of 8 people in a boat, and I haven't been able to confirm that. So, if anybody has a Chinese friend who knows about those things, I'm assuming that this comes from the church in China, but I don't know. I have heard that. So 8 men in a boat makes a great pictogram for salvation, if that's true. So the water prevailed, and all flesh perished, including birds and cattle and beasts and swarming things that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. And of all that was on the dry land, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, everything died. And he blotted out every living thing. Okay, and only Noah was left, together with those that were with him in the ark. And okay, now I want to emphasize that the point of all of this is that the entire earth was involved in this flood. The Bible is quite explicit that this was not a local event. It didn't happen in the Mesopotamian Valley. several feet of mud found at Sumer is not evidence for the biblical flood. Some erosion in the Black Sea is not evidence of the biblical flood. We should be looking on a very large scale. The surface of the entire planet was affected by this event. And obviously, that would require an astounding act of God. The sending of a flood was miraculous in the sense that this is not a normal thing. God sent an act of judgment, completely outside of the normal experience of mankind. And in verse 24, we're told that the water prevailed upon the earth for 150 days. So 7 days to get in the ark, 40 days the water increased in its level, and then 150 days the water prevailed. The word prevailed is a rare word. It occurs several times in the Bible and is always difficult. It appears to mean something like to move back and forth or to slosh. If you think about water, if it's 15 feet or 15 cubits above the highest mountains, there's nothing on the surface of the earth that will slow the water down once it starts moving. So there are parts of the world's oceans that are known very well to be wide open for thousands of miles. For instance, in the South Atlantic and South Pacific, there's an area called the uh, uh, oh goodness, the 40s, 40 degrees south latitude. If you were sailing from, say, South America to the Philippines, you would go south of Cape Horn, the southern end of South Africa, and you'd be in the roaring 40s. The sea there has a tendency to generate horrendous winds and enormous waves because it has thousands of miles to work with nothing at all, no land masses at all to slow down tides, currents, or anything else. The Coriolis effect caused by the rotation of the Earth and the lunar gravitational pull that creates tides would create tidal waves. Um, Tidal waves all over the surface of the entire Earth, and it would be a sloshing effect to such an extent that it's entirely possible that there would be places that were briefly high and dry, probably not dry, very muddy, but the water would be moving with tremendous force. And the erosion in one place would result in sediment in other places. As all this is going on, anything that could swim would, but nothing can swim forever. And everything, with the possible exception of some of the fish, would be killed. The birds would fly as long as they could. People would head for high ground. They would cling to floating things as long as they could. There would be whole rafts of forests, for example, and surviving people would stay on those as long as they could until it finally became impossible, and then they would die. Most of the larger animals who survived the flood for a while on on rafts or whatever, would eventually die, but they would be buried close to the surface. And we don't find very many of their fossils. The fossils that we find are mostly of relatively small animals and fish and uh, miscellaneous stuff, worms and whatnot. There's roughly 2 miles of this thick around the whole globe that is sedimentary rock full of fossils. And we demonstrated that last week with the Grand Canyon information. The entire Earth was involved in this thing, and the water prevailed for 150 days. But God remembered, this is chapter 8, verse 1. God remembered Noah and all the beasts and cattle that were with him in the ark, and God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. I have no idea how that wind made the water go away, but the water began to subside. In order for the land to subside, the dry land is going to have to go up and the ocean basins will go down. There's kind of an equilibrium there as the land area comes up and the basins go down. This would not have to be an enormous thing, some thousands of feet. But among other things, the drifting of the continents would have been taking place at this time. So you're going to find the original Pangea, the original single continent, broken up into parts and drifting on the surface of the earth, floating on the underlying basement rock, as it were. And the front or leading edge of the continents as they drift would produce a kind of crumpling of the rug effect, and mountains would form. So the mountain formation is a direct result of the drifting of continents on the surface. So the whole Earth is involved, and all of mankind was killed during this time except Noah. So the fountains of the deep, floodgates of the sky, the rain stopped, and the water receded. And that recession lasted 150 days. In the 7th month, 17th day of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. Ararat is in the Mesopotamian literature called Urartu. It's in the upper northeast corner of modern Turkey, where it borders Armenia, just south of the border with what used to be Russia. I think it's Uzbekistan now. But at any rate, it's one of the stands that's just to the north of there. Ukraine is in there to the left, and this is an area that we know fairly well. The mountain range just north of Ararat is called the Caucasus, and the word Caucasian comes from that. People who live in the Caucasus mountain region are called Caucasian, and that has become European in general, I guess. All of that is going on there. The precise location of the resting of the ark is not known. Every once in a while, some valiant explorer will go off to Turkey or to Armenia and try to hike up into the mountains and prove that this, that, or the other location is the site of the landing place of the ark. And so far, they made lots of videos, and lots of famous books have been written, but none of them have demonstrated that the ark itself survived the flood. It would be fairly unusual if the ark has survived to the modern day. and I don't expect to find it. But every once in a while that comes up, and I've never been impressed. But that's that's kind of the way that is. And so at the end of 40 days, there in the mountains of Ararat, Noah opened the window of the ark, and he sent out a raven, and it flew around and didn't come back. Later on, he sent out a dove to see if the water was abated. And the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, and she returned. And then he put his hand and took her, and then waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again. And the dove came to him toward evening, and in her beak was a freshly picked olive leaf. So olive trees were apparently growing somewhere, and this dove had found them. Noah waited another 7 days, sent out the dove again, but she didn't return. This time she found some place that looked like it would be kind of fun to build a nest or whatever, and she's gone. And on the verse 14, the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. So there we go. This is the 601st year in the second month. So roughly a full year since Noah had gone into the ark. We see Noah getting out of the ark. He says, "Get out, every living thing." And Noah went out, every beast, every creeping thing. And verse 20, it's significant. Noah built an altar. He took took of every clean animal, every clean bird, offered burnt offerings. So the idea of an altar and a sacrifice is clearly mandated for Noah. He understood that this was necessary. We're going to find later that prior to Abraham, prior to the people of Israel, there is a monotheistic tradition that includes the belief in one true God, who is the Redeemer and the Judge, and who demands worship in the form of sacrifice. We're going to discover that. We're going to discover also that the pagans have some notion of this, but it's horribly distorted. And all of this becomes a part of the long history. So, verse 21, the Lord smelled the soothing aroma. The Lord said to himself, I will never again curse the ground on account of man, for the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth. I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. Okay, so there's kind of a promise there that God will never send another flood. Uh, the the next judgment is going to come a different way. When we read the prophetic literature about the end time, it looks more like fire than a flood. God isn't promising here that he will never judge the earth again, just that he will never again do it this way. And then the promise in verse 22, while the earth remains. In programming, we call this a do-while loop. Okay, here's something that is going to keep going as long as the earth remains. One day, God will create a new heaven and a new earth, and will do away with the old heaven and earth. But as long as the old heaven and earth prevail, as long as they remain, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. So the earth will continue to rotate on its axis. The earth will continue in its journey around the sun with its tilt built in so that there will be seasons on the earth. I'm not sure what the seasons were like prior to the flood. I'm not sure anybody is. But at any rate, there's going to be seasons, there's going to be cold in the winter and heat in the summer, day and night, seed time and harvest. A regular procession of the usual things. Uh, Non-Christian people or atheists uh, have taken it for granted that everything always proceeds as it has from the beginning of creation. Again, this is what Peter says. Mockers will come with their mocking, saying, everything continues as it has since the creation. This is the basis of the false doctrine of uniformitarianism, that there can never be a catastrophe. Well, God says there has been a catastrophe and there will be a catastrophe, and the salvation from that catastrophe is by grace through faith in the completed work of God in Christ. That's the gospel message in a nutshell. And the flood narrative is the foundation of that basic gospel message to the world. So, okay, let's see where I'm going with other stuff. Yeah. In chapter 9, what have I got here? Details of the flood. Okay, let's do this. The extent is worldwide. Noah built an ark instead of a wagon. If it was a local flood, he could have walked. God's anger was with the entire human race. That's why it has to be universal. And the description of the cataclysm is worldwide. Uh, all of the details that are given suggest a worldwide flood. And the evidence of sedimentary rock bearing fossils all over the world is the evidence for the flood. Sedimentary rocks, the presence of oil in those rocks, mountains, glaciation, volcanoes, all of this is explained by the flood geology. Now, as we get out of this, let's see, this is, okay, I've gone through this. Okay, and we've gone through that. So let's go into, does that look like lunch? That looks pretty good. Chapter 9. God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Now, you'll probably recognize that that is a recapitulation of the initial covenant with Adam. God said to Adam and Eve, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, become a family, become grandparents, have a big family, lots of children, and let them go out and fill the earth. And as they go, they'll cultivate the ground, they'll dig for minerals, they'll take an axe into the woods and log. They will find ways to make a living on this good earth. That's the point. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground, all the fish. Into your hand they are given. This is new. Prior to the flood, the animals and birds and fish were not afraid of men because man didn't eat meat. In the beginning, Adam and Eve were given fruit to eat. At the fall, vegetables were added. Here, we're going to see another change in man's menu. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I give it all to you as I gave the green plant, only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood. Okay, so meat is on the menu now. So a big plate of meat and potatoes, which actually that looks like it'd be good over rice if you take a good look at that, a nice risotto would just that would be good. I could have stood some of that instead of the squid ink, but at any rate, this looks good. We eat meat as a part of a necessary diet. God has not designed us to eat merely fruit anymore. We can't do that. Our digestive system won't tolerate that. Neither can we eat merely fruit and vegetables, the so-called vegan diet. We've got to have protein. The easiest way to get protein is meat, red meat, or fish, poultry. So the eating of animal protein is healthy. It's normal. It's a good thing. This is this is okay. Now, partially, this is the result of sin, because there is sin in the world. Animals now become hunted prey. So that's less than perfect, but it's in God's will. So we do this because it's necessary. All right. The next bit here, beginning at verse 5, is controversial, so we're going to take a good close look at it. Surely I will require your lifeblood. From every beast I will require it. So that's fairly straightforward. If some animal becomes a man-eater, those of you who live in the village where this thing occurred need to go out into the forest and find that animal and take its life. Okay, if some bear has become a man-eater, you must find a way to deal with that. If some lion has started eating people, you've got to go into the jungle and find that lion and kill it. It's the law of the jungle, quite literally. But he goes beyond this. From every beast I will require it, and from every man, from every man's brother, I will require the life of man. You remember that when Cain killed Abel, he wasn't held accountable for that any more than he had to live with the curse. He was considered a bad person because he had murdered his brother. Now God says something different. Verse 6, whoever sheds man's blood, by a man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. Okay, so this is the institution of capital punishment. This is the instruction to Noah that he's to pass on to later generations, that when men live together in villages or cities and something terrible happens and one man kills another, you're going to need to have some kind of a system in place to deal with that. The killer, the murderer, must be held to account and he must be put to death, because God made man in his own image. Human life is therefore sacred. Now, it's interesting that the lives of the animals is not held sacred in the same way. Now, we're to be thankful for our food, but we're still to eat. We're still to kill and eat. But man is special. That's a very important distinction. In this modern era, we're told that man is a parasite on the earth, and it would be better if we abort all the babies and stop filling the earth with people. Let the lions and the bears and the hippopotamuses have it back. Um, that's not biblical. It's not even close. The introduction of capital punishment here is the foundation of human government. Uh, God doesn't give us here any particular form of government. It could be a tribal chief. It could be the juju man. It could be sooner or later people are going to invent the idea of the king, which is not a bad idea. It's not a great idea, but it's not terrible. Monarchies have worked in some places, many others they don't. The dictator is a form of kingship, uh, only there's no hereditary thing. Elected leaders is another way to do it, and it doesn't always work very well. Uh, we in America have elected leadership, but we don't always get very good leadership. So human government is almost never perfect, uh, but it's very interesting that the only real responsibility that God gives to human government is the bearing of the sword. This is the phrase from Romans 13. Uh, be wary, be obedient to the powers that be in government, for the minister of government does not bear the sword for nothing. So the sword bearing is an important responsibility. We have to take that seriously. And so capital punishment for murder and other high crimes uh, is authorized here. Also, military activity. If another group of people does something terrible, they run into somebody else's land, kill a bunch of people, and try to steal the land, for example. That's an aggressive war. And the nation which is being attacked has a responsibility to fight back. This is military action. And if it has allies, those allies will come together and fight back in order to try to reestablish a just relationship. That's why wars happen. Wars happen because somebody has decided to sin in large scale. Blow a hole in the fence, run into those villages over there, rape and plunder and pillage and burn, just to show them that we can. Okay, that was wrong. You can't do that. And the decent people need to put together an army to make sure either that those things don't happen or that they are punished when they do. The military might is never justified in a war of aggression. Because for instance, here in the United States, I might look north and say, well, Canada has a lot of empty space. We could sure use some of that. Uh, it would be wrong to organize an army and march north to take Canada. That would be wrong. And anybody who does that deserves the trouble he gets into. Um, so capital punishment as well as the military might altogether form what we call the Ministry of Justice, which is the foundation of human government. Human government is instituted to bear the sword to protect God-given rights of life and liberty, for that matter, against others who would take those away. Uh, all other functions of government are optional. Everything else with a wall. What about the judicial thing? Well, that's the sword bearing thing. How extensive should the laws be? Well, God-given principles should become the foundation for human law. If we want to have other laws besides the law about murder and unlawful military action, we need to take those from biblical principles. And God will later on give us the Ten Commandments, which are at this point in Scripture already assumed. And I won't go through all of that. But at this point, all of that is already here. But in Exodus, we will see the complete development of all 10 commandments as the foundational principles for the law code of a nation. And that has been true in Western civilization ever since. So in the entire Jewish world and then the Christian world, the Mediterranean world in general, leading to Europe, the Romans developed their law based essentially on a Judeo-Christian understanding of the basic principles. And that Roman civil law becomes the foundation of Western civil law. Now, the whole world doesn't share in that because there are other approaches to God. So Islam has Sharia, which is very different from Ten Commandments based law. Hinduism and Buddhism have an entirely different approach to the legal system. But this is where the Western Judeo-Christian ethics comes from. And everything else that government does, like taxing us to build roads and space programs and whatever, those things are all optional. They're not commanded by God. Virtually everything that modern governments do, I believe, would be better done by the family or the local community. Not everything. There's some places where it really helps to have the whole country working on something together. If you want an interstate highway system, it's good for everybody to get together, but there are very few things that require that. Okay, so capital punishment, that's kind of a big deal, actually. At the end of this, be fruitful, multiply. Verse 9, God spoke to Noah and his sons, saying, Behold, I myself establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you. And with every living creature, the birds and cattle and beasts of the earth and all that comes out of the ark, every beast, I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood, neither shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. And this is the sign which I'm making between me and you and every living creature for all successive generations. I set my bow in the cloud. It shall be a sign for you of a covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant. So we call this the rainbow covenant. This is the promise that there will never be another flood. This is probably the first time that there's been a rainbow. Again, this is an argument for the vapor canopy. It had never rained before, and they'd never seen blue sky before. It had always been kind of misty and kind of moderate temperature. Now we're going to get temperature changes. We're going to get differences in different parts of the planet. And when it rains, when you look in the right direction, there will be a rainbow. And that rainbow is a sign of God's promise that there's going to be a normality, a consistency to the natural world. Now, I'm just going to note briefly, I'm not going to make a huge deal out of this, but I need you to understand that the use of the rainbow as a symbol for homosexuality is blasphemous. We really should not put up with rainbow flags and rainbow symbols and all of the rest of that in our society. We shouldn't do that. If it's taken to be a sign for the goodness of the LBGTQ2S plus whatever, all of the silliness. You get these transvestites dancing around with their rainbow flags. That's blasphemy. What God has promised is a consistency to nature, not a queerness to nature. Okay, I have to make sure that does what it does. Okay, so what have I got here? And then the last bit of chapter 9 is interesting. I'm going to go down to verse 18. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Yeah, that's an important statement. Moses says quite specifically that from Noah, who was the 10th generation from Adam, three sons were sent out, and from these three sons, the whole earth was populated. Again, this is the universality of the flood, thus the universality of the repopulation of the earth, dating back to these three sons who are the sons of Noah. We're going to see that developed in chapter 10, which we call the Table of Nations. I'm going to do the Table of Nations next week. That's actually a very, very important chapter. It's a difficult chapter to lecture through, but it's really, really an important thing. So the sons of Noah came out, and Noah began farming. This is verse 20. And he planted a vineyard. Now, it takes several years for a vineyard to begin producing fruit. It doesn't pop up the first year. But Noah planted a vineyard. I'm assuming that Noah took seeds or plants, shoots with him onto the ark. I'm assuming that Noah knew something about farming before he got onto the ark. That at any rate, Noah began farming, and after a while, there were grapes, and he drank of the wine and became drunk. Okay, the drunkenness here is interesting. It's almost as though it were a surprise to Noah. Uh, if you take grape juice, if you get grape juice at the store, it's been pasteurized, so the bacteria is all dead. But if you take just ordinary grapes, you put them in a vat and squish them all, take that juice, and don't do anything else with it, it will eventually ferment. That's normal, and all fruits do this. It's the process of the sugar and some other things. This stuff ferments, and a lot of vegetables will do this too, and not all of it is good for you. But one of the products of fermentation is alcohol. And so the grape juice would begin having an alcoholic content. One line of thinking here is that prior to the flood, fermentation didn't happen. The natural process of fermentation hadn't been invented yet. So this is a new thing. Because it would appear that Noah is surprised. People who are used to drinking wine know better than to drink a whole bunch at once, because that results in drunkenness. And unless that's what you're trying to arrive at, you don't do that because it makes you stupid. And that's exactly what happened to Noah. And he uncovered himself in his tent. Now we're not told exactly what's going on here, but he's in his tent and he doesn't have any clothes on because he's dead drunk. He's probably asleep. And so uh, there he is inside the tent, and Ham, and again it's mentioned, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Now, we don't really know what Ham did. We know that it's going to result in a curse, and it's a very important curse. Uh, and it is going to be paid off later on. We'll see that work out in history. We don't know exactly what is going on here. It may have been as simple as uh, Ham making jokes, showing a lack of respect for Dad. Might have been that simple. Other scholars have suggested that this is a much darker thing, including perhaps homosexuality. And we don't really know. So we shouldn't be dogmatic, but whatever it was, Ham did a bad thing. And his brothers, Shem and Japheth, took a garment, laid it on their shoulders, walked backwards, covered up the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away. They didn't see their father's nakedness. So the other two behaved honorably and tried to cover up their father because it's shameful to be running around naked and drunk. Uh, and they waited. And Noah awoke from his wine. He knew what his youngest son had done to him. We're not told how he knew. Did the others say something? We don't know. But what we do see is this curse. Cursed be Canaan. Now, fascinating. It's not cursed be Ham, but cursed be Canaan, the son of Ham. How interesting. A servant of servants he shall be to his brothers. Blessed be the land, or blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. So Canaan specifically, that one family, is set apart for a specific judgment because of the sin of Ham. We're not given any other explanation for this. Later on, the Canaanite people groups that occupied the promised land will be driven out by Joshua and by the Israelite nation. And that is considered a just recompense and a fulfillment of the curse on Canaan. It's some have suggested back in the day here in North America, 300 years ago, there was a practice of slavery in this country, and black people from Africa were purchased and brought here to use on plantations. Well, that was a bad thing. That was never a good thing. And some people during that period of history argued that this is all right because God cursed Ham. And Ham, of course, is the African peoples. Well, Ham is also the Canaanite peoples. Ham was not cursed. Canaan, one of the sons of Ham, was cursed. So this curse is not the foundation of the rightness of slavery for black people. That, in fact, is a racist and really very stupid idea, and it has no basis in biblical theology. So, anyway, Noah lived another 350 years after the flood, and the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Okay, everybody dies. He's the 10th in the sequence, and he lived 950 years. Now, after this, we're going to find a decreasing of the lifespans. Some have suggested that's because of the end of the vapor canopy. There was a very healthy environment. Now we're going to have a much less healthy environment. And among other things, food that's left out will get moldy or ferment or whatever. And we're going to catch diseases from our food and from the environment and from everywhere else. Bad, bad, bad. Next week, we're going to get back to, let's see if I can find a way to make this stop. Let's stop the share. And I'm going to invite, see if I can find it here. I'm going to invite unmuting. Let's see if I can make this go away. There we are. Now I can see everybody again. All right. Thanks for being here. Next week, we're going to continue at chapter 10. We'll do 10, 11, and probably an introduction to chapter 12 next week. I will have additional notes going on through chapter 15 available to you by next week. So God bless everybody. It's good to see everyone. Thank you for coming.
Ciao a tutti.
Ciao a
Ciao.
tutti. Yeah, yeah.
Ciao, ciao.
Love you guys. And I'm seeing
Grazie
and
tanto,
Roger in Palermo. Yeah.
Grazie.
Bye. And Anton, I see you there. Is Jen there? Yeah, there's Jen. Hey, guys. Okay. Yeah, everybody's here. And Oscar and Sally, yeah, there. I got you. I see everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Jim.
All right. We'll see you next time. God bless everybody, and we'll get back to you next week. Ciao, ciao.
Buonasera.